You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because your life feels like it's buffering. Same alarm, same phone scroll, same "I'll get serious soon" promise you've been recycling for years. And the craziest part, you're not even failing. You're doing everything you were told to do. You set goals, you make plans, you try to find your purpose, you watch productivity videos at 2 times speed like that's gonna save you, and yet somehow life still feels wrong. Not chaotic, not broken, just quietly suffocating, because nobody told you this part. The system you're using to design your life was built for factories, not humans, for predictability, not reality, for control, not growth. And if you keep following it, you're not going to end up lost. You're going to end up trapped in a life that technically works but never feels alive. This video is based on the book Tiny Experiments by Anne-Laure Le Cunff, neuroscientist, entrepreneur, and founder of Ness Labs, one of the most respected platforms at the intersection of thinking, learning, and mental performance. Anne-Laure didn't write this book because she was bored. She wrote it after doing everything right. Elite education, high status career in tech, the kind of life that looks impressive from the outside and quietly eats you alive from the inside. What makes this book dangerous and necessary is that it doesn't motivate you to dream bigger. It tells you that the way you've been dreaming is the problem. That the obsession with goals, purpose, certainty, and 5-year plans isn't making you disciplined. It's making you fragile. This video is not a replacement for the book. It is an educational commentary and analysis created under fair use for the purpose of learning, critique, and discussion. And we're not here to politely summarize chapters. We're here to tear apart the ideas you've been using to run your life and replace them with something that actually works in a world that refuses to stay stable. Because the truth is brutal. Most people don't fail because they aim too low. They fail because they lock themselves into paths that can't adapt. And this book offers an alternative that's uncomfortable, experimental, and honest. Not a master plan, not a life purpose carved in stone, but a way of living that treats uncertainty as fuel instead of failure. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. That's the point. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The lie of the straight line. You know the drill. Work hard, set goals, get a purpose, stick to it, and you'll arrive at success like you'd follow a GPS route. Trouble is, life isn't a map with blue navigation lines, and the universe doesn't hand out lane departure warnings when we stray. The straight line model of life, where clarity must precede action, where purpose is a destination instead of a living strategy, isn't just outdated, it's actively harmful. The book kicks into that energy head on. The straight line was never human life's true shape. It was a social engineering project designed for industrial systems, not messy, unpredictable human beings. When we lock onto a single outcome and treat fixed, future-only goals as the truth, our brains go into survival mode. Neuroscience and psychology back this up. When outcomes are rigid and uncertain, people put action on hold because failure feels like identity death, not feedback. That's why procrastination skyrockets in environments where deadlines lurk like judgment, not invitations to experiment someday. Research following Swedish university students found procrastination isn't random. It fluctuates throughout an academic year. And it's deeply tied to how we perceive time, stress, and goal prospects. Students delay not because they're lazy, but because fixed deadlines trigger threat responses in the brain. That matches what the author is getting at when she says linear planning sneaks fear into everything we do. And this isn't just individual pathology. Global anxieties about careers and purpose have exploded from Bogota to Bangkok to Berlin. Podcasts like The Diary of a CEO bring on spiritual teachers like Sadhguru, who simply say, purpose isn't something you find, it's something you live through practice and awareness. clinging to a single overarching purpose, the way many self-help frameworks demand, drives burnout and meaning crises instead of grounding us. There's a reason for this. Humanity's collective experience has been smashed by overlapping uncertainties, global pandemics, climate crises, AI revolutions, economic disruption. That's not extra. That's the context we're trying to fit old models into. A meta-analysis published in Nature Human Behavior just last month showed that insistence on rigid goals doesn't increase well-being. Letting go of impossible goals and replacing them with flexible aims improves mental health, resilience, and satisfaction. Goals become not prisons, but tools of navigation. Think about that. It isn't stubborn persistence that makes people thrive. It's the ability to adjust, reframe, and iterate. This aligns with psychological theories like temporal motivation theory, which shows motivation is not static. It intertwines with how close or feasible a goal feels, and how much cognitive bandwidth we have to value it. Deadlines that feel too far, or goals that feel too fixed, collapse motivation. Yet rather than appreciating this complexity, conventional wisdom still sells ambition like it's a laser beam you lock on once at 18, 23, or 30, and then you never change it. That is why millions scroll social media feeling they're behind. At the same age, someone else posted a highlight reel of their life. The environment shapes our internal urgency. Podcast hosts like Jay Shetty have pointed out how the cultural social clock compounds this. We treat achievements as if there's only one lane and one timeline. That trap amplifies nothing but fear of falling off track, when in truth, we are all on different arcs of growth. And here's the kicker the book makes with precision. Goals are not inherently bad. They direct attention, motivate effort, and create structure. Classic goal-setting theory from Locke and Latham shows that difficult, specific goals can improve performance, but only when they are paired with feedback and adaptability. When they become rigid endpoints disconnected from real feedback loops, they become chains. News isn't just academic. All around the world, people are waking up to this. In the Netherlands and Scandinavia, worker satisfaction studies show that companies that prioritize flexible growth frameworks over fixed quarterly targets report lower burnout and higher innovation. In Japan and South Korea, conversations about career paths increasingly reject lifetime track thinking in favor of multi-career trajectories. And even in entrepreneurial hubs from Lagos to Mexico City, the most resilient founders talk less about mission statements and more about constant iteration on direction, release, feedback, revise. The straight line is already dying in practice. We're just terrified to articulate it. Because here's the cruel truth. When goals stop being endpoints and become experiments, failure stops being a threat and becomes data. When purpose stops being a monument and becomes moment-by-moment intention, fear shrinks and curiosity expands. The straight line dies, but what replaces it is not chaos. It's momentary direction born from interaction with the real world, an approach backed not just by this book's argument, but by cognitive science, global well-being research, and contemporary reflections across cultures. Key idea. A rigid, linear approach to goals and purpose makes uncertainty terrifying and leads to avoidance, procrastination, and burnout. Framing goals as flexible experiments aligns with how human cognition and modern life actually work. Key takeaway: letting go of the myth of a singular purpose and fixed goals improves mental well-being, motivates action, and turns failure into useful information. Favorite quote: ambition isn't broken, it's the way we set goals that's broken. Stop chasing certainty, start running experiments. Forget neat timelines, rigid checklists, and life as a series of milestones you must hit to feel human. If you've ever chalked ambition up as a series of perfect boxes to tick, then stalled in the face of complexity or doubt, you're not defective. You're operating on outdated software. Life doesn't hand you equations with clear solutions. It throws ambiguity, forks in the road, unexpected turns, and invites you to act without certainty. This is where the modern world is, and where the book's core argument in this reconstructed chapter lands. Stop chasing certainty and start thinking like an experimenter. The book's core insight here is deceptively simple. Traditional planning disguises fear as control. It dresses up certainty as a virtue and shame as a compass. When ambition is tethered to guaranteed outcomes, we freeze because the brain's risk aversion circuits kick in. Failure doesn't feel like a lesson, it feels like identity death. And yet, the world we live in, hyper-connected, constantly shifting, defined by unpredictable tech, climate, and economic flux, demands a mindset where uncertainty isn't avoided, it's used. This is not just philosophical fluff. Cognitive science backs it. The pseudo-certainty effect shows that people think they've achieved certainty when they've really only locked in part of a plan, ignoring all other uncertainty still in play. In classic experiments by Kahneman and Tversky, people preferred sure wins, even when the expected outcome was worse, because the idea of certainty first feels safer, even if it's illusionary. That's the trap. Certainty feels secure, but it's often a fantasy. Real life is vindictive to certainty. Just ask millions of Brits who feel abandoned by the traditional 5-year plan. According to a UK study of 4,000 adults, 70% no longer use long-term plans because they're too rigid or life keeps moving faster than their roadmap. People are waking up to the fact that a plan you can't stick to may be worse than no plan at all, as long as you stay motivated, adaptable, and responsive to incoming data. This is where the book and current research intersect. The author speaks of a pact to treat uncertainty not as an enemy, but as information. Modern workplaces and creative fields have already made this shift because rigid, outcome-driven projects consistently fail in the face of complexity. Agile methodologies, popular in tech and business, are based on iterative experimentation, building small, testing fast, learning quickly, adapting, not following a plan etched in stone. In agile teams, uncertainty is not failure, it's feedback, and knowledge is gathered in loops instead of final exams. Even psychological research supports this practical shift. Studies on design mindsets, essentially the ability to iterate, tolerate ambiguity, and create solutions with uncertainty in view, show that people with higher ambiguity tolerance and self-efficacy are better at navigating problems without predefined outcomes. They don't pretend uncertainty doesn't exist. They work with it. Podcasts and public thinkers phrase it in human terms that resonate. In a Big Think interview, the author herself argues that an experimental mindset is the antidote to fear-based living. Uncertainty shouldn't paralyze you. It should excite your curiosity. Instead of find your purpose and cling to it, think in terms of research questions. What am I testing here? What do I want to learn? What will this action tell me about my world and myself? This reframes failure as data and fear as signal, not destination. This mindset shift is not just about professional life either. Personal growth, relationships, career pivots, lifestyle changes, all these domains benefit from experimentation. Research on human decision-making shows that once you commit to a specific plan, your brain's implementation mindset filters out contrary evidence, making it hard to pivot even when new information emerges. Recognizing that plans are provisional instead of sacred allows you to adjust based on real feedback, not hope. Everyday life reflects this bigger pattern. People use tools like ChatGPT to structure life tasks and then complain about generic or idealized answers because certainty was promised but not delivered. What matters is the ability to adapt those tools, to question, iterate, and adjust, not to expect perfect blueprints. A recent study investigating exactly this found that while AI can help break big goals into pieces, humans still need to provide context, adapt to changing conditions, and design plans that accept failure as part of progress. And here's the human reality. When you treat your life as a series of experiments rather than a march toward a fixed prize, discomfort ceases to be a warning to stop and becomes a compass for growth. Researchers studying personal development note that discomfort often signals expansion, not failure, and that those who reinterpret discomfort this way learn faster and adapt more effectively. So here's the brutal truth the book forces you to face. Certainty will never come before action. You don't wait for confidence, you build confidence by acting, observing, reflecting, adjusting, and doing again. Plans aren't magic spells, they are hypotheses to test. The world doesn't reward those who cling to certainty. It rewards those who validate assumptions quickly and adjust with clarity. That is the experimental warrior's way. Not a rigid path toward a promised land, but an ever-moving terrain where every step teaches you something about the next. Key idea: replacing rigid goal pursuit with an experimental mindset transforms uncertainty from threat to feedback, enabling action, learning, and adaptation. Key takeaway: certainty is an illusion. Progress comes from iterative action, rapid feedback, and reframing failure as data to build resilient forward motion. Favorite quote: uncertainty shouldn't terrify you, it should orient you. Time is not your enemy. Everyone claims they want more time, but almost nobody actually understands what time is. Not in the clocks and calendars sense, but how our minds perceive it and how that perception shapes our actions and identity. The book's reconstructed argument here isn't a productivity trope. It's a psychological revolt against the cultural lie that speed equals success and that perfection before action is the only acceptable threshold. Time is not your enemy. Procrastination is not a villain, and imperfection might be your greatest ally. Let's face it, most cultures tell us to dominate time. Hustle harder, optimize more, beat the clock, sprint like every second is a scoreboard to be won. But humans aren't stopwatch machines. Our experience of time is profoundly psychological. The Zeigarnik effect tells us why half-finished tasks claw at our minds. Unfinished events stick in your head because cognitive tension doesn't let them go until they're resolved. Your brain literally keeps tabs open on what you didn't complete. It's not laziness, it's stress. Recent world news illustrates this perfectly. Americans are losing hundreds of hours of sleep each year to revenge bedtime procrastination, where people stay up late, knowingly harming their health just to claim time back for themselves because daytime was swallowed by obligations. They're not avoiding sleep, they're reclaiming a sense of agency in a life that otherwise felt out of their control. Procrastination gets weaponized as a moral failing. You're lazy, you're undisciplined, you're failing. That garbage has been circulating for decades, but decades of psychology now call bullshit on it. Researchers emphasize that procrastination isn't about time mismanagement, it's about emotion regulation. Your brain isn't waiting for a better schedule, it's dodging discomfort, fear of judgment, or even fear of success because that triggers psychological threat responses. That's why you'll hear people in forums or on the Diary of a CEO or Jay Shetty's podcast say the real struggle isn't calendars or planners, it's how tasks feel. If something triggers anxiety, uncertainty, boredom, or threatens your self-image, your nervous system flags it as a biological threat. And guess what the brain does with threats? It avoids them. That's not laziness, it's self-protection. Procrastination isn't random, it's a spectrum. Some people procrastinate only on tasks they find aversive. Others do it across their lives because the emotional cost of facing their goals is too high. Around 20% of adults can be chronic procrastinators, and nearly all students have experienced it. That's not just anecdote. Statistics from psychological science confirm it. Deep procrastination is correlated with fear of failure, fear of judgment, perfectionism, and emotional avoidance, not laziness. But here's where the book expands that into something practical and humane. Time is psychological territory, not mechanical units to conquer. Time can slow when you're bored and speed when you're absorbed. That's not mystical. That's how memory, attention, and reward systems work. The rise of slow productivity, as articulated by thinkers like Cal Newport, underscores this. Working fewer, deeply focused hours often yields better creative output than the classic crush it 24/7 hustle culture. Slowness, in this sense, isn't passive. It's aligned with intentional imperfection. Perfectionism delays beginnings, handicaps risk-taking, and kills creativity because you fear making the first move until conditions are perfect. Humans historically learned by doing, failing, adjusting, surviving, iterating. That's how toddlers crawl before they walk, scientists experiment before they publish, and artists draft before they polish. Doing is the pedagogy, not waiting, not prepping infinitely, doing. The book reframes mistakes not as moral shortcomings, but as data points, signals in your personal learning feedback loops. Look at how science reframes procrastination itself. In behavioral economics, it's tied to present bias, the preference for immediate comfort over delayed benefits. That's not stupidity, it's a survival heuristic misaligned with modern life. Early humans prioritized immediate calories. Now we procrastinate filing taxes or writing reports. Our brains haven't evolved to prize distant rewards over moment-to-moment comfort, which is why digital distractions are so effective. And research on psychological flexibility puts an even deeper stake in the heart of the myth that time only moves forward in a straight line. People who can adapt to task stress, who can reframe fear as curiosity, who can tolerate ambiguity, are less likely to procrastinate. Time doesn't get conquered by force, it gets inhabited by attention. The real breakthrough is this. Reframing time, procrastination, and imperfection doesn't just make you feel better, it changes how you act. When you drop the expectation of perfect execution before starting, the emotional threat drops. When fear drops, your limbic system stops hijacking your prefrontal cortex. You start acting. Imperfection becomes evidence of growth, not testimony of inadequacy. If we see productivity as a flow state, not a sprint, we escape the trap of performance theater. Real life, writing, building, loving, thinking, happens in the cracks of imperfection, the spaces where you try, fail, adjust, and try again. That's where momentum lives. And that's where time stops being an enemy and becomes the medium through which your life unravels into something real, not just aspirational. Key idea: time is psychological experience, not mechanical units. Procrastination is an emotional cognitive response, and imperfection is the natural condition of action and adaptation. Key takeaway: reframing time and delay as part of learning, rather than faults to eradicate, unlocks authentic momentum and liberates creativity and resilience. Favorite quote: doing is the pedagogy, not waiting, not infinite prep, doing. The feedback loop advantage. We like winners, but the world doesn't hand out linear wins, especially not in complex systems that change faster than our plans. If life were a ladder, decisions would be a series of rungs you must ascend. Instead, reality looks more like an interconnected web. Choices create information, which creates better choices, and that's not a ladder, that's a loop. The book's core: about iterative learning, building growth loops, and better decisions, and throws it against the real world, psychological science, and global examples showing that loops beat ladders every time. A feedback loop is straightforward on paper: act to observe, to adapt, to act again. That cycle, frequently buried in corporate buzzwords or Silicon Valley growth rhetoric, is actually how human learning and adaptation work in natural systems too. Cognitive psychology puts it bluntly: learning isn't a straight line where you make a choice and hope it works. It's a cycle of decisions informed by outcomes feeding right back into the next choice. What psychologists call a feedback loop literally lets us upgrade our internal models instead of committing prematurely to an idea and pretending nothing else matters. In military strategy, this is called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act, because the moment you commit to a decision without fresh observation, you're chasing ghosts. That's not decisive leadership, that's blind guessing with fancy vocabulary. From startups to global policy debates, dynamic feedback and iteration beat rigid plans. In the startup world, growth isn't linear, it's circular. Think about Airbnb. Its hosts bring guests, guests bring reviews, reviews attract more guests, and that attracts more hosts. That's a loop, not a funnel. Once you see loops, you begin to recognize how the most explosive success in tech and business isn't about perfect planning. It's about systems that feed outcomes back into action. And this isn't marketing fluff. Educational psychology research shows that virtuous loops exist inside individuals too. Beliefs about competence strengthen goal pursuit, which strengthens achievement, which then strengthens belief. And that's a positive feedback loop inside your mind. Conversely, procrastination, self-doubt, and inaction form vicious loops that drag outcomes down. Recognizing these cycles lets you intervene where the loop starts, not where it collapses. Organizations used to believe decisions were one-off events. That's how dinosaurs thought extinction was avoidable. Collecting outcomes, analyzing them, and feeding them back into future decisions is now acknowledged as critical to adaptability. Google scrapped traditional annual performance reviews in favor of real-time feedback loops precisely because static assessment couldn't compete with the pace of technological and market change. Real-time feedback turns each decision into a teacher, not a judgment. Modern research also reinforces the nuance. Feedback loops aren't all sunshine. AI-driven feedback systems, fitness apps, gamified productivity tools, streak badges on social platforms shape behavior in ways users don't fully control. They can motivate but also drain autonomy and increase anxiety as people chase external signals rather than internal direction. That's why the loop matters as system design as much as personal reflection. Feedback without autonomy becomes manipulative, not liberating. Something the book touches on indirectly, but that research confirms, is the power of double-loop learning. Most of us fixate on adjusting actions while keeping underlying assumptions the same. True loop thinkers question the rules that generated the decisions in the first place. In other words, when you look at why decisions are failing, you often find the problem wasn't the choice itself. It was the assumption beneath it. Double loop learning rewrites the playbook while the game is happening. Look at climate policy debates, for example. Traditional mitigation strategies focused on linear targets: phase out coal, build renewables. But climate systems themselves are feedback loops. Renewable power sources can undercut their own economics through price effects, creating loops that slow progress unless policy adapts continuously. That's the real world screaming at us. Systems are loops. Adaptation isn't optional. Even the economics of decision science, the field that studies how people really make choices, shows that we're not rational automatons following static preferences. Behavioral researchers like Elke Weber show that decision makers construct preferences dynamically while arguing with themselves about what matters right now. That's fundamentally loop thinking. Your values aren't a given. They're negotiated in real time, informed by what you observe, what you value, and what you're willing to risk in uncertainty. Real growth loops are not just business jargon. They are the skeleton key for unlocking not only better decisions, but better lives. They blow apart the old idea that decisions are fixed points you make once and stick with forever. In the real world, they are ongoing cycles of refinement, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner your actions stop looking like forced marches and start looking like adaptation. Key idea: growth loops and feedback loops are not just corporate buzzwords. They are a fundamental structure of how learning, adaptation, and decision-making work in complex, uncertain environments. Key takeaway: treat decisions as iterative loops, not final endpoints, to turn every outcome into information that sharpens future choices and fuels continuous growth. Favorite quote? Decisions aren't destinations, they're data points in an ongoing loop of adaptation. Dancing with chaos. The world doesn't break once, it keeps breaking again and again. And the myth that disruption is some isolated crisis you can survive if you prepare for it is one of the most toxic lies we've been sold. Modern life doesn't interrupt itself. It unravels and reassembles over and over. Disruption isn't an exception, it's the baseline condition of reality. This chapter burns that myth down and gives you a different lens. Disruption isn't a breakdown, it's the heartbeat of growth. If you've ever felt blindsided by change, company restructure, AI rewriting your industry, a global pandemic shutting everything down, you already know this truth viscerally. Disruption feels like loss because it shakes your identity, but beneath that shake is an invitation, evolutionary pressure. In leadership literature, disruption is often framed as a temporary storm you weather before returning to calm. But that's optimism anchored in predictability, and reality is no longer predictable. The book's original subsections on how to dance with disruption show that rigidity is the real failure mode. Fixed plans, rigid identities, and fixed outcomes fall apart first. Psychologists have a better frame. What threatens people under disruption isn't change itself, it's loss of control and meaning. Research on psychological resilience shows that resilient people don't just cope, they adapt their thinking, emotions, and behaviors during crises and often gain new function afterward. In fact, fields like trauma psychology talk about post-traumatic growth, where some individuals come out of hardship stronger or more aware than before because they integrated the experience instead of resisting it. This isn't abstract. Think of the COVID-19 pandemic, a true global test of resilience and disruption. While some saw only collapse, others emerged with new ventures, radical innovations, and entire industries reborn. Universities, companies, and research institutions didn't just survive, many thrived by forming new collaborations, diversifying methods, and building hybrid models of work and life that are now industry standards. A recent analysis exploring the resilience of scientific communities during the pandemic showed not collapse, but an initial surge in collaboration and productivity that outpaced pre-pandemic trends before settling into a new normal. But let's be clear, disruption feels terrible because your nervous system equates uncertainty with danger. It triggers fight or flight signals that make your brain want to shrink back, seek comfort, and avoid risk. Business leaders and psychologists now recognize this as a common reaction. Research published on resilience in crisis situations shows there are heterogeneous trajectories during a disruption. Some people spiral, others stabilize, but a notable group actually integrates the experience and grows beyond their previous baseline. The difference isn't luck, it's mindset. Human resilience isn't about stoic endurance, it's about dynamic flexibility, the capacity to adjust, learn, and reuse disruptions as data instead of blows. Google even has an entire podcast series dedicated to resilience at work, where neuroscientists and performance coaches break down how people adapt mental models to stress and thrive through uncertainty instead of just surviving it. Here's where it gets real. Disruption doesn't wait for permission. Whether it's climate change, throwing supply chains into chaos, geopolitical instability, shifting labor markets, or AI suddenly rewriting what millions of jobs look like, systems are changing so fast that the next disruption is always starting while you're still processing yesterday's. A recent World Economic Forum report shows nearly half of CEOs globally believe their companies won't survive the next decade unless they reinvent themselves to account for constant change, not occasional disruption. It's not just imagination, it's data. So how do you dance with something that constantly resets the floor beneath you? You cultivate resilience. And I don't mean grit as a buzzword, I mean psychological resilience, the genuine capacity to cope with crises and rebound quickly into functioning, growth, and adaptation. Originally defined in the 20th century through decades of longitudinal studies, resilience has been shown to arise from a blend of self-regulation, social support, flexible thinking, and a positive orientation toward challenge rather than threat. Every culture and discipline has its version of this insight. Martial artists talk about using the opponent's force. Climbers talk about trusting the rope during the fall. Parents learn too late that the messiest phases of growth often signal real development. In psychology, clinical frameworks like the restart model emphasize recognizing chaos, embracing flexibility, and trusting uncertainty as steps to rebuilding meaning and balance after disruptions hit. Podcasts on resilience, whether it's Finding Mastery or Resilient Futures, explore how high performers and communities manage change not by resisting disruption, but by learning to navigate it iteratively. The key isn't resisting the tide, it's learning to swim. This chapter reframes disruption from monster to mentor. Where most people see unpredictability as chaos, the resilient see it as information. Where others freeze, the adaptable move. Leaders who flourish don't treat disruption as a one-time crisis, but as a perpetual condition. And crucially, they build systems, habits, and relationships that are designed to adjust with every incoming wave of change. Key idea: disruption is not an anomaly to overcome. It is a continuous force that, if engaged with flexibility and resilience, becomes the engine of growth and adaptation. Key takeaway: resilience isn't survival, it's dynamic adaptation. Learning to treat disruption as feedback rather than threat transforms uncertainty into progress. Favorite quote: disruption doesn't ruin lives, rigidity does. Build in public, grow with others. Humans are not islands. You don't scale alone. You don't grow alone. You don't master life by burying yourself in isolation and praying that genius will break out of solitude. That might be romanticized in success stories. The lone founder in a garage, the solitary genius in a tower. But in reality, the people who actually grow accelerate through connection, collaboration, visibility, and collective reflection. This is not about networking as a superficial LinkedIn metric. It's about social flow and learning in public, the deep human processes of shared momentum, co-creation, and mutual feedback that turbocharge both innovation and meaning. Inside the book, How to Unlock Social Flow and Learning in Public argue that personal progress and learning don't happen in vacuum bubbles. They happen when you put yourself in contact with others, share your process, face reflection, and evolve through interaction. That's the psychological engine beneath what communities of practice, participatory cultures, and online learning networks are doing. And the science backs it up. Before we go further, let's anchor this with evidence. Research about online communities of practice and social learning shows that when people engage collaboratively in shared challenges, knowledge sharing increases trust, innovation, and professional development. Those aren't fluffy claims. Communication visibility and collaborative knowledge production have been shown to boost both engagement and individual performance in real online environments. But they also come with real human consequences. Stronger social bonds, increased learning, and sometimes stress when boundaries blur between public and private life. That's the paradox of social flow. It amplifies growth and amplifies accountability. But playing small doesn't build resilience or meaningful impact. Showing up does. Look at the rise of open source software communities like GitHub or Wikipedia. They aren't organized like corporations with hierarchical instructions. They thrive because individuals truly build in public, share what they're working on, receive feedback from millions of users, and iteratively improve together. The structure of these communities, where your contributions are visible, actionable, and integrated into a collective body of work, is fundamentally social flow. It's not just about code, it's about identity, belonging, feedback loops, and shared purpose. The author understands this implicitly, presenting learning and growth as social phenomena, not isolated ones. Cultural movements from participatory media to citizen science embody similar dynamics. Participatory cultures, where people actively create, share, remix, and comment, democratize creativity and mutual learning. Those cultures mathematically increase the collective intelligence of groups because each participant contributes unique perspectives, which multiply through interaction rather than remaining siloed. In the physical world, this shows up too. During the COVID-19 pandemic, researchers found that a sense of community and shared participation was central to harnessing collective intelligence and collaborative knowledge creation via crowdsourcing social media efforts. That helped track virus spread, share safety information, and create localized solutions. It wasn't centralized command that solved problems. It was participatory knowledge creation powered by social flow. When you learn in public, you expose your process, not just the polished end result. This is scary because it means exposing uncertainty, gaps, and vulnerability, but it's extremely efficient. The act of sharing your process invites reflection, correction, and mentorship in ways that private toil never does. Projects like online learning communities, where people solve problems together across borders, echo this as well. Learning becomes social, not solitary. This is the foundation of communities of practice, where deep knowledge doesn't just get transferred, it emerges from interaction. Collaboration inside cities, institutions, and research contexts shows similar patterns. In cross-sector collaborations across US cities, projects succeeded not because one hero drove it, but because participants responded to setbacks together with mutual learning, adjusting governance and tasks in real time. Teams that blamed each other failed. Teams that learned collectively succeeded. That's social flow in institutional life, learning with others, not against them. Then there's co-production, which is basically collaboration on steroids. Co-production invites public stakeholders, communities, citizens, users into the design and implementation of public services instead of just consulting them. This back and forth, co-creative engagement dissolves boundaries between experts and participants and creates shared ownership of outcomes. That social flow elevated into societal evolution. Every major domain, education, tech, public policy, science, is moving toward this idea because the old isolated expert model fails in complexity. Complex problems require collective intelligence, not individual genius. And this is not a future prediction. This is happening now. Educational frameworks on smart learning environments emphasize social interaction as the core of effective learning, where technology facilitates peer engagement, feedback loops, and shared problem solving rather than just delivering content. But don't romanticize it. Social flow does not magically fix everything. Group dynamics can be messy. Identity threats, bias, conflicts, misalignment of goals, all can impede progress if not acknowledged and navigated. Social environments can also induce stress if boundaries between collaboration and burnout aren't managed. And that's exactly why the author's argument is compelling. Growth doesn't happen in isolation. Solo ambition caps out quickly because the world you inhabit is shared. Networks amplify learning, reflection, accountability, feedback, and even innovation. When you choose to share your work publicly, even imperfectly, instead of waiting for some authoritative truth or perfect iteration, you invite the world to teach you. This is the core of social flow and learning in public. It's not performance art, it's real human development. Key idea: growth emerges through social flow and learning in public. Shared practice, collaboration, and public feedback accelerate learning more than isolated effort ever can. Key takeaway: meaningful progress thrives at the intersection of community and openness. Sharing your process publicly invites collective intelligence, accelerates learning, and builds shared momentum for growth. Favorite quote: "In connection, we evolve. In isolation, we fossilize." Success without a finish line. We spend so much of our life trying to arrive, to reach the finish line, achieve legacy, etch our name into history, that we forget we are already here, alive, evolving. Modern culture sells the idea that life has a final destination, a status, a legacy, a scrapbook of accomplishments, and that anything short of that is failure. This chapter slams into that myth with brutal clarity. Life isn't waiting at the end of a finish line. Life is happening while you try to get there, and the sooner you make peace with that, the more of your life you actually live. Legacy isn't the point. Growth is the point. Inside the book, the themes of life beyond legacy and the conclusion, "Hello, experimental life," are blended into an argument few people will readily admit out loud. We are not defined by a singular legacy, and legacy shouldn't be the governor of how we live. What psychologists and cultural critics now call positive adult development shows that humans continue to grow throughout life, not in rigid stages ending in a peak, but in continuously evolving directions that include wisdom, experience, adaptability, and meaning making. Growth doesn't stop in youth, it morphs and deepens as we age. The idea here isn't quaint optimism or self-help brand slogans. Longitudinal research on adult development redefines maturity not as arriving at the plateau, but as becoming more complex, reflective, and integrated over time, traits that correlate with life satisfaction, health, and contribution to society. The implication is radical. A finish line life model isn't just outdated, it's psychologically harmful because it denies the very engine of human growth. A life lived for legacy often sacrifices present engagement, curiosity, and adaptability, the exact things that create meaning and connection. This resonates with what global media and psychological research increasingly show. Contemporary coverage of well-being trends, especially in psychology today and global policy labs, emphasizes that personal development is a lifelong journey, not a checklist with a final box to tick. Growth often shows up through relationships, challenges, reflection, and community, not trophies. It emerges in how we engage with others, how we respond to adversity, and how we adapt to changing contexts. Personal growth isn't a phase, it's a continuous unfolding of self, and acknowledging that fundamentally changes how we relate to life. One incisive psychological concept related to this is post-traumatic growth. The idea that struggle can yield psychological transformations that increase appreciation of life, relational depth, personal strength, and openness to new possibilities. This isn't superficial optimism. It's evidence that crises often reshape identity and purpose in ways that outlive the pain. Growth beyond resilience means not just returning to baseline after difficulty, but surpassing it with newfound perspective. The world over, people increasingly reject the idea that life's pinnacle happens once. There's a broader cultural shift towards lifelong learning, reinvention, and adaptive identity. Policies in the EU around intergenerational fairness emphasize not leaving a legacy that benefits only the privileged, but co-creating futures that include multiple generations, not for status, but for justice and collective flourishing. That's real meaning beyond ego. That's legacy reframed as shared impact. Look at major new research in the Netherlands and beyond. There's funding now, millions of euros, going into collective citizen research to strengthen community resilience and adaptive capacity rather than individual reputation or one-time legacy projects. Public policy is recognizing that collective action and growth loops produce more durable impact than singular hero stories. That's a shift from legacy as trophy to legacy as ongoing ecosystem contribution. Podcasts like Finding Mastery underscore this shift at the individual level. Hosts and guests, from Olympic champions to corporate leaders, consistently reject the legacy as finish line narrative, instead highlighting mastery as an ongoing process of learning, recalibration, and self-expansion. Their conversations aren't about settling for a landmark accomplishment. They dissect how refining skills, attitudes, and relationships over time creates a life that accumulates depth rather than hollow proof points. What the book and the wider world is telling us is this: when we reframe life from finish line thinking to ongoing evolution, something shifts in how we relate to fear, ambition, and loss. People who think of life as a perpetual series of experiments are less likely to cling to rigid outcomes and more likely to engage deeply with the present. They recognize that value lies not in external accolades or static legacy, but in continuous growth, relationship quality, and contribution that ripples forward. We lack a universal finish line. We have only lived moments that flow into each other, shaped by the work we do, the people we connect with, and the ways we respond to change. Legacy isn't a trophy on a shelf. It's a life lived generously, curiously, and resiliently, an imprint that continues to evolve long after any one goal is achieved. Key idea: life isn't a destination with a finish line. It's an ongoing journey of growth, reflection, and continuous evolution that outlives the desire for a singular legacy. Key takeaway: letting go of legacy as endpoint frees you to live fully through ongoing growth, deep connection, and meaningful contribution rather than chasing validation from external milestones. Favorite quote: legacy isn't a trophy. It's the story your growth tells long after you stopped running towards certainty. Conclusion: you were never stuck because you lacked discipline. You were stuck because you were following a map that assumes the world stands still. Every idea in this book, every experiment, every loop, every rejection of rigid goals keeps circling back to one uncomfortable realization. The problem was never you. It was the operating system you were handed, a system that told you life moves in straight lines. That clarity must come before action. That purpose is something you find once and defend forever. That productivity means speed. That disruption is a mistake. That growth happens alone. That success has a finish line, and chapter by chapter, that entire illusion gets dismantled. What replaces it isn't chaos. It's not recklessness. It's not just vibe and see what happens. It's something far more threatening to the status quo. A life built on experiments instead of expectations. Instead of asking, what should I do with my life? You ask, what's the smallest thing I can try next? Instead of clinging to certainty, you treat uncertainty as information. Instead of worshipping goals, you build systems that learn. Instead of beating yourself up for procrastinating, you listen to what resistance is trying to tell you. Instead of panicking when plans fall apart, you adapt faster than the world can destabilize you. Instead of isolating yourself in silent struggle, you learn in public, grow with others, and let feedback sharpen you. And instead of chasing a legacy you may never live to enjoy, you focus on being alive right now, curious, responsive, awake. That's the quiet revolution this book proposes. Not overnight transformation, not a dramatic reinvention montage, but a permanent shift in how you relate to your own life. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Most people don't need more motivation. They need permission to stop pretending they have everything figured out. They need a framework that allows them to move without guarantees, to act without certainty, to grow without locking themselves into identities they'll outgrow anyway. This book doesn't promise you'll win at life. It promises something better. That you'll stop waiting for permission, that you'll stop outsourcing your confidence to future outcomes, that you'll stop living like life is a test you're terrified of failing, and start living like it's a laboratory where every action teaches you something, where every misstep refines you, where every day becomes usable, not wasted. If you've ever felt behind, stuck, or quietly restless despite doing everything right, this book isn't a comfort. It's a confrontation, and if any part of this video made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is curiosity knocking. So here's the challenge. Stop asking for the perfect plan. Stop waiting for clarity. Stop treating uncertainty like a verdict. Run one tiny experiment, then another. Then let the results teach you who you're becoming. And if you want the full depth, nuance, and framework behind everything you heard here, buy the book, read it slowly, use it, argue with it, test it against your own life, because the straight line was never real, and the experimental life isn't a phase, it's how you stay human in a world that won't stop changing. If this changed how you think, share it with someone who's stuck but doesn't know why. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Not motivation, not hype, but ideas that actually hold up when life gets messy. And remember this, you don't need to find your path, you need to start walking and let the path reveal itself. See you in the next one.